Okay, today I'm excited because we're going to do a very special video this time. This time only in English because we have a very special guest here in our branch in Zurich. We welcome Bill Lowe. He's the founder and CEO of AudioQuest. So welcome, Bill.
Thank you very much.
So we're going to talk a little bit about the history first. So I would like to know a little bit more about how you came to the industry. How did you come to HiFi, and what actually brought you to becoming one of the most prestigious brand? And it's not only a brand, it's one of the few specialist companies focusing only on cables and power. So Bill, tell us a little bit how it all got started.
A kid who liked music, as do all of us. Mm-hmm. So some people take an provocation, something that they care about, and get a job so they can make money to buy a car. In my case, I was 13 years old when I went away to a boarding school, mm-hmm. and I already liked music, of course, but each student had probably at that time a KLH or Magnavox portable HiFi in their room. Mm-hmm. And so when you live in a little room away at school, your world, if you care, is just your room. Mm-hmm. I covered the walls with maps, blankets, pictures to visually make it my world. Kind of being a control freak in a way. And orally, the power of walking into somebody's room when they were playing a record was like, whew, I want that. I want to feel like that. And I sold my little record player for $13, and using my 50-cent a week allowance, made payments to another student for their old, little bit better record player. Discovered that a record player is not just one piece, it's a turntable and an amplifier and a speaker. Mm-hmm. And I put little $1 US speakers around the room just to fill the room, to own the room. Mm-hmm. And everything from there to today is not a plan, but just one small step at a time, building Dynakit amplifiers and Heathkit amplifiers for other students for $5 or $10, and using the money to buy a used turntable. Mm-hmm. It was, as I say with the business, never a plan. When it came time to get a job, I never got a job. I just wanted to be self-employed. I did not plan a company. I did not have a path. Oh, this is what I'm going to build. Mm-hmm. I sold HiFi out of my apartment, mm-hmm. Advertised, a progression from manufacturer's representative to a HiFi dealer in Santa Monica, California, mm-hmm. in 1978. And 1976, Polk, this loudspeaker company, made kind of a big noise in Chicago at the Consumer Electronics Show when they introduced cable. Mm-hmm. That for those of us who were sort of at the edge, what's new? What have you heard? What's good? This was very interesting. Mm-hmm. And that was 1976, June. And so 2 years later, when I went back to retail, to selling HiFi, I wanted to have a better cable for my little store. Mm-hmm. And I cooperated with another small dealer in Southern California, and we had a custom-made cable. Mm-hmm. And then a few other dealers said, "Can I buy your cable?"
Okay.
And a Japanese distributor visited in 1979 and said, "Can I buy your cable?" And it was not my idea to sell to other businesses. I just had it for my store. But by 1980, I thought, maybe I should make cable for the purpose of selling to other stores. Mm-hmm. And that very first design that was not by me, Dave Gore, an amplifier designer, the Quattro gain cell amplifier, had read the European magazines and Martin Collins in HiFi News had written about finely stranded Litz wire. I think in Litz in German means a strand.
Yes.
But Litz in English is an arrangement of insulated strands to minimize skin effect or loss of amplitude.
Right.
And he'd read about this type of wire and had a sample made, and again, these two dealers, myself and another, had heard it and said, this is good. And I'm not an engineer, have no electronics background. I mean, I had sociology and economics and psychology and some physics and some biology and some art history and linear algebra. I have what we call a liberal arts education, which is, I strongly believe in liberal arts education, which is not about what you learn, it's learning how to learn. So I think if I had an advantage, as I found myself trying to understand cable and how to make a better one, it didn't come from how much biology or sociology I knew. It came from practice of learning and experimentation and what I guess would essentially be called scientific methodology at an individual level. I have a very competent engineer now working for me, Garth Powell, who designed the Niagara power filters and is responsible for a big improvement in the power cables, but in combination with what I did. And I refer to what I did as feeling my way around in the dark. And by accident, oh, this makes a difference. Let me see if I can understand why and do it on purpose.
Right.
And many, many things that shouldn't be true. How come? A good example of an accident, that very first cable was made by a company that made medical, wire for medical. And the strands were wrapped with nylon. And it didn't look good, but that was what they normally did, and that was where I began. And I said, well, but that doesn't look so good. Let me give it a clear jacket, and then you can see the strands. And since the strands are insulated, they can have a color. So one side was red, and one side was look of copper, and oh, that's pretty. And that was fine, just cosmetic, no damage, just for the eye. Then Monster cable came out in 1979, and it was a very flexible stranded cable. I thought, I can be flexible too, and I made the jacket a little softer, purely just because it might feel easier when you're hooking it up. Small thing. But then I visited a potential customer, a loudspeaker manufacturer, asked, maybe I should use your wire inside my speaker. Come over and let me listen. And before the CD and before remote control, the turntable was often near the listener and the amplifier, like here, but the speakers were farther away.
Right.
So I walked in with a 8-meter pair of cable. And we made a comparison, and my cable sounded much better. But maybe I'm a little competitive, and I went back to the car and got a 3-meter pair of cable, because shorter is better. The law in cable, with a few particular exceptions, cable causes damage. Less cable, shorter cable causes less damage. And with speaker cable, that's the most true. With low-level cable, not as much damage, but length is an enemy. So I thought I would bring in the 3-meter cable, and it would be even better. It was not as good. What's wrong? Very embarrassed. The 8-meter cable had the hard insulation. The 3-meter cable had the soft insulation. Now when I received, if I'd been really smart, when I received the cable with the softer insulation, I should have listened, but I did not expect a difference. This is human. You see this all the time. So I did not expect a difference, but then by accident, I heard a difference, and I had to figure out why. And discovered that in Japan there were some companies that, or individuals more than companies, would put cable in a trough and fill it with epoxy. That the idea of mechanical stability in a cable existed, but not very common. Not many people had this awareness. And start making comparisons that if your battery dies in your automobile and you use what we call a jumper cable, that actually when you make the attachment, sometimes the cable will move. And it's the same mechanism. And it was not until 1987 that John Dawson, my distributor in England, Arcam, who is an engineer, explained to me rule of rights, magnetic field, two strands near each other. The north of this strand and the south of this strand are going to attract when there's current. And whether it's the jumper cables to an automobile or it's just in a loudspeaker cable, there's going to be intermodulation. And if you can minimize that change, keep it as constant as possible, you'll have better sound.
Right.
And there were many of these little accidents. They're not accidents meaning I fell down, but they're not things I planned. Good accidents. So that's what I call feeling my way around in the dark. And as a result of doing that for 35 years, now for 40, when Garth came to AudioQuest to start the Niagara business, the power filters, he knew I made good cables, he liked them, but he hadn't thought about them. But he investigated from his knowledge, what was I doing and why did it work? Because I had things that I had noticed and acted on and had helped manage into higher performance that my understanding was local. I did not have a big engineering picture to put it into. And in general, the engineers sometimes have something I call engineer's disease, which is if they don't understand it, it doesn't exist. So they're not always, as a community, the most helpful in moving the front, of being scientific. Science is the investigation of the unknown. Engineering is the application of the known. And they touch each other, but they're not the same.
Right.
For the best engineers and best scientists, yes, they really come together. But as a vocation, they're kind of different worlds and different attitude, different way of thinking. So Garth came to AudioQuest, looked at what I was doing, and understood it more than I would ever understand it. But they were things he would not have thought to investigate. That I had the advantage of feeling my way around in the dark, being ignorant, not knowing what should or should not make a difference, but acting scientifically on the empirical evidence. This makes a difference. A friend of mine made subwoofers, this giant coffin, and he said, can you make a cable for me? Just take your cable that has two conductors and just put 4 together so I'll have twice as much metal and I can sell it with my subwoofer. Said, sure, I made the cable, but I did listen.
Okay.
And I compared 2 of the twisted pair against the 1 4-conductor. And the 1 4-conductor was much better. And so the idea of geometry, I don't know if you've seen our business card or the 4 elements, we call it, and that the relationship between the conductors is an important design ingredient. I didn't think it up. I didn't study in research to learn that. It was this good accident that taught me, you must pay attention. And then I made cables on purpose with 6 in a circle, 8 in a circle, 10 in a circle, and the jump to what I now call a star quad. Well, many people make star quad, but is an important jump. And then the jump to a circle is another advantage. And how big the circle is not important. But there is as with almost everything in life, there is a trade-off. The more conductors there are, the more interaction, which is a source of confusion and dispersion and type of thing that makes you get bored instead of be excited to listen. So cable, as with amplifier and loudspeaker and almost all design, is a matter of careful compromise. Any designer who thinks, this is the magic, I figured it out, I have the key, and goes down the one path, there are probably 100 things that they're not paying proper attention to. And sometimes you hear the result at a hi-fi show, and the designer is so proud that they worked for 6 months to make some little thing just right. But the big picture is wrong.
Yeah.
But if you listen for the one thing that's right, I got it.
Yeah.
But we might walk into the room and say, yeah, but why would I listen to this?
Yeah. Yeah, I see that.